The words that hurt the most aren't the ones shouted in anger. They're the ones that make you realize you were never loved the way you loved them. When my mother told me to get out, I didn't cry because of the insult. I cried because she didn't hesitate, not even for a second. But she didn't know. The girl she pushed away was the only one still holding the family together. Jimoke had spent hours cooking a simple meal, hoping to make her mother's birthday special. She carefully set the table, arranged the food, and even lit a small candle. Her heart was full of love, but the moment her mother saw the modest gift Jimoke brought, her face twisted with anger. "This is all you could do? You can't even get something proper like your siblings," she shouted. Jimoke opened her mouth to explain, to tell her mother about the long hours she worked at 2 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. But before a word could leave her lips, her mother slammed her hand on the table so hard that the plates rattled. "You are ungrateful. Get out and never come back." The words hit Jimoke like a physical blow. The room went completely silent. Her siblings looked at her with a mix of shame and fear, but none of them spoke up. None of them moved to defend her. Jimoke's chest tightened, not because she felt defeated, but because the people who should have protected her simply watched. She realized in that moment that the love she had poured into the family didn't matter to them. She had tried, she had cared, and it had been ignored. The anger in her mother's voice faded, leaving only coldness, and Jimoke knew she couldn't stay in a place where her heart wasn't valued. Slowly, she stood up, her hands trembling, trying to hold back tears. Every step she took away from that table felt heavier than the last, but deep down, a small spark of determination began to grow. Even though she was being pushed away, she knew this wasn't the end of her story. She just didn't know yet that leaving was the first step toward finding the life she deserved. Jimoke stepped out into the cold night, the chill immediately biting through her thin jacket. She had nothing with her except a small backpack containing a few clothes, and the few things she could grab in a hurry. Behind her, the door slammed shut with a finality that made her chest tighten. Her mother didn't call after her. There was no pause, no second thought, no tiny voice saying, "Wait, let's talk." Even her little sister Amara, the only one who had ever cared, was pulled away from the window before she could even run to her side. Jimoke felt the emptiness of the house behind her. The echoes of laughter and warmth she once knew now replaced by cold silence and rejection. Her legs started to ache as she walked aimlessly down the quiet streets, her shoes crunching against the gravel. Every step made her heart feel heavier, but she kept moving because standing still meant facing the reality she wasn't ready to accept. She passed dim streetlights, her shadow stretching long and lonely on the pavement, and for the first time, Jimoke realized how truly alone she was. No one was coming after her. No one was waiting for her. She had always thought she belonged somewhere, that her love and effort mattered, but now it felt like the world had turned against her. Tears threatened to spill, but she pressed them back, knowing they wouldn't change anything. She thought of her mother, of the home she had lost, of Amara's worried face, and it hurt more than she could put into words. Every house she passed felt like a reminder that she had no place to go, no one to turn to, no hand to hold. The cold seeped deeper, but with it came a strange clarity. Jimoke realized that if no one was going to care for her, she would have to care for herself. The ache in her legs and the sting in her heart became part of a quiet determination growing inside her. She was scared, yes, but also aware that this night, this lonely walk, was the start of something she had never dared to imagine. A life where she could choose herself, where she could step out of the shadow of rejection, and find a place where she truly belonged. For the first time, being alone didn't just feel like loss. It felt like the first step toward freedom. Jimoke sat on the cold curb outside a closed store, hugging her knees to her chest and trying to keep warm. The night air cut through her thin jacket, and she could feel her teeth chatter with every gust of wind. She didn't know how long she had been sitting there, feeling small and invisible, when an elderly woman appeared out of the shadows. Her face was kind, lined with years of life, and her eyes seemed to see everything without judgment. Mama Tano didn't ask why Jimoke was out there, didn't demand answers or explanations. Instead, she quietly knelt beside her and draped a thick, warm shawl over her shoulders. The warmth hit Jimoke immediately, and she felt a small flicker of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. The woman's voice was gentle, yet it carried a weight that made Jimoke stop shivering, not just from the cold. "Some homes break you, Mama Tano said. So destiny can rebuild you. Jumok looked up, meeting her eyes, and something in those words stirred something inside her she had thought was lost. She had spent so many years trying to make a family love her, trying to fix everything, and it had all failed. But now, for the first time, she heard that maybe leaving, being hurt, and losing everything was not the end. It could be the beginning. The woman didn't just hand her warmth in the form of the shawl. She handed her a tiny seed of hope, a hint that life could still have good things waiting for her. Jumok clutched the shawl tighter, feeling safe for a moment, and slowly, a thought crept into her mind. Maybe she didn't have to stay where she was unloved. Maybe she could find a place where her efforts mattered, where her heart was seen. For years she had felt invisible, ignored and worthless, but Mama Tano's words planted the first spark of belief in herself. That single sentence repeated itself in her mind, soft but persistent. Some homes break you so destiny can rebuild you. It made her feel like someone had finally acknowledged her pain and her potential. The cold around her didn't seem as sharp anymore, and her heart, though heavy, felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time since her mother had thrown her out, Jumok felt something close to hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild her life, not for her family, not for anyone else, but for herself. And that tiny possibility, fragile as it was, made her want to take the first step toward a new beginning. Jumok had always been the quiet one in her family, the daughter nobody noticed. While her siblings got praised for school awards or expensive gifts, she spent her days fixing broken things around the house. Old radios, cracked phones, a wobbly chair. Nothing was too small or too broken for her to try and repair. She loved drawing too, sketching small machines, gadgets, and clever little inventions that could make life easier. But no one ever looked at her work and said, "Wow, that's amazing." Her family didn't care. They didn't see the hours she spent thinking, designing, or repairing. To them, it was just chores or useless hobbies. When Mama Tano saw Jumok's sketches and little gadgets one evening, she paused. She didn't laugh or dismiss them as childish play. Instead, her eyes lit up, and she gently took the papers from Jumok's hands. "Child, these aren't toys," she said softly. "These are solutions. You have a gift, and it's time someone saw it." Jumok's heart raced. Nobody had ever said that to her. Nobody had ever told her she was talented, smart, or creative. Mama Tano didn't just give her words, she gave her belief. She told Jumok about a small workshop in the city where people repaired electronics and built new things, a place where ideas mattered more than money or status. Without hesitation, she connected Jumok to the workshop owner, making the call, arranging the meeting. Jumok could hardly believe it. For the first time, someone outside her family saw her, really saw her. She packed a small bag, careful not to leave behind anything important, and stepped into the city streets, her mind buzzing with excitement and nerves. The workshop was small but busy, filled with people tinkering, repairing, and creating. Jumok felt at home immediately. The owner welcomed her, curious about her skills, and she quickly showed her gadgets, her sketches, and the little inventions she had dreamed about quietly at night. They listened. They asked questions. They encouraged her to try more ideas, to experiment, and to learn the tools of the trade. For the first time, Jumok realized that the skills nobody in her family valued were exactly what could change her life. She felt a spark of pride and hope rising inside her, stronger than any hurt her mother had caused. This was her chance. Not for approval, not for attention, but to build something of her own, using the talents she had spent years hiding. And that thought alone made her heart beat faster, filling her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. Jumok threw herself into her work like never before. From the early morning until late at night, she repaired broken phones, fixed radios, and built small gadgets that made everyday life easier. She also started designing low-cost tools for homes, things that people could actually afford, but that worked just as well as expensive products. Every day, she learned something new. How to use materials better, how to make her gadgets last longer, even how to manage money and sell her creations. It was exhausting, but for the first time, she felt alive and important. People began to notice her inventions. At the local markets, her small tools, simple, clever, and affordable, started to sell fast. Customers came back again and again, telling their friends and neighbors. Word spread quickly, and soon, Everyone wanted one of Jimoke's gadgets. It amazed her how something she had always done quietly at home, something her family never cared about, was now changing lives and making people happy. The workshop owner watched her grow and decided it was time to give her the recognition she deserved. He helped Jimoke register her designs officially, so the gadgets were no longer just hers in practice, they were hers in law. When she finally saw her name printed on the documents, bold and clear, her chest swelled with pride. Jimoke Adeyemi owner. The words made her heart leap. She had never felt so validated, so acknowledged. Her family had never called her talented. The world around her was finally seeing what she had always known about herself. She imagined showing her mother, proving that she wasn't invisible or worthless. But she didn't need anyone's approval. She had done it for herself. Every evening, as the workshop closed and the last customer left, Jimoke stayed behind, tinkering, improving her designs, thinking about new ideas. She was building a life with her own hands, step by step. Her inventions were no longer just tools. They were proof of her determination, her intelligence, and her refusal to be defined by rejection. She smiled quietly to herself, realizing that the girl who had been kicked out, ignored, and belittled was now someone people looked up to, someone who had turned every struggle into a success story. And in that moment, surrounded by her tools, sketches, and creations, Jimoke felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was rising, stronger and brighter than anyone had expected. Back at home, life began to spiral out of control the moment Jimoke left. Her siblings, who had always relied on her quietly fixing things and keeping the household running, started moving out one by one, claiming they wanted independence, but leaving behind a mess that no one knew how to manage. Bills piled up, debts accumulated, and small problems that Jimoke had always handled with patience and care grew into mountains her mother couldn't climb. She spent hours on the phone calling relatives, friends, anyone who might lend a hand, but nobody answered. Calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored, and the pride she had always held onto gave way to desperation. The house felt emptier than ever, the laughter and warmth replaced by tension and fear. Every creak in the floor, every flicker of the lights, reminded her mother that she had lost the daughter who quietly held everything together. Jimoke, far away, heard nothing and didn't even know how badly her absence was shaking the family, but she felt the tug in her heart when she saw the first messages from Amara, small and trembling, begging to meet. One evening, under the cover of darkness, Amara sneaked out, careful not to be seen by their mother or the older siblings. She ran through the streets of the city, her small frame weaving between shadows and streetlights, calling out softly until she finally spotted Jimoke, sitting outside the workshop, tinkering with a small gadget as if the world's problems couldn't touch her. Amara ran toward her, tears streaming down her cheeks, and clutched Jimoke's hands tightly. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Everything is breaking, Jimo. We need you." But Mom won't admit it. Jimoke felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had imagined her mother's struggle, but hearing it through Amara, seeing the worry and fear on her little sister's face, made it real. It was not just about bills or broken appliances anymore. It was about a family falling apart because they had taken her for granted, because they had ignored the one person who had always held everything together quietly, without complaint. Jimoke's heart ached for Amara, for the fear in her voice, but she also felt a quiet strength growing inside her. She understood in that moment that she had the power to protect and care for the ones who truly mattered, even if the rest of her family had failed. The city lights glinted off her sketches and gadgets, and for the first time, Jimoke realized she had a choice. She could help, but only on her terms. She didn't need to save everyone, just those who deserved it. And as Amara clung to her, trembling but hopeful, Jimoke silently promised herself that she would never be invisible again, that she would rise, but not let anyone take her for granted, no matter how loud the cries or desperate the pleas. A week had passed since Amara had found her, and Jimoke had begun to feel a little peace in her new life. Then her phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made her chest tighten immediately. Her mother. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity mixed with concern made her swipe. Her mother's voice came through, sharp and demanding, with none of the softness or regret Jimoke had secretly hoped for. "Jimoke, the house, it's being seized. Bills are overdue. Everything is falling apart." You need to come home and fix it, like you always do. Her words weren't apologies, weren't even a hint of sorrow. They were commands, like she had never left, like her leaving had changed nothing at all. Jimoke sat quietly, the phone pressed to her ear, feeling the weight of every word. Her heart ached, not for the money or the house, but for the fact that after everything she had endured, after being kicked out, her mother still saw her as nothing more than someone who existed to solve problems for the family. She remembered the nights she had stayed up fixing broken appliances, cooking meals, and covering for her siblings. She remembered the humiliation at the dinner table when her mother had yelled, "Ungrateful! Get out and never come back." And now a week later, it was like none of that mattered. Jimoke's fingers tightened around the phone, and she took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. The cold anger and disappointment mixed in her chest, but she didn't speak immediately. She realized something that made her heart both heavy and strong. Nothing had changed. Her mother had not learned, had not reflected, had not shown even a shred of care. She still demanded, still tried to pull her back as if love or gratitude were owed, not given. Jimoke finally spoke, her voice steady but quiet. "I hear you, but I can't come back to be treated like I'm only useful. Things need to change before I step foot in that house again." She felt a small surge of power in saying it, the first time she had put herself first in years. Her mother's sharp reply faltered for a moment, replaced by silence, and Jimoke hung up. She leaned back, letting the weight of the call settle. Her heart was heavy, yes, but clear. Nothing had changed at home, and she would not let herself be pulled into old patterns. For the first time, she understood that leaving had been the right choice, that protecting herself was more important than fixing a house built on disrespect. And though the call had tried to lure her back, Jimoke knew she had already built a life she could not leave, a life where she was finally in control. Jimoke decided to go back to the house, but not to stay. She wanted her things, the few belongings she had left behind, and maybe a sense of closure. Walking through the familiar streets, she felt a mix of anger and sadness building in her chest. When she arrived and stepped inside, the house felt smaller, darker, and colder than she remembered. Her mother spotted her immediately and, without pause, began to shout, blaming her for leaving, calling her selfish, and saying she had abandoned the family. The words were sharp and loud, trying to shame Jimoke into guilt. But this time, Jimoke didn't flinch. She walked calmly, gathering her clothes and personal items, ignoring the anger raining down at her. She remembered every moment she had been taken for granted, every time she had been invisible, every meal she had cooked, every broken appliance she had fixed, every time she had been yelled at for being ungrateful. She felt a quiet strength building inside her. Then Amara, who had been standing silently, watching the scene unfold, finally lost her patience. Her small frame shook with emotion as she stepped forward and yelled, "You didn't lose her. You pushed her away." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Everything went still. Jimoke's mother froze mid-sentence, her face pale, the lies and excuses she had repeated so easily now exposed. For the first time, someone dared to say the truth aloud. Amara's voice, small but powerful, carried the weight of years of pain, disappointment, and love that had been ignored. Jimoke felt tears sting her eyes, not of sadness but of relief. She had always known the truth in her heart, that she had been forced out, blamed unfairly, and made to feel unworthy. But hearing it spoken gave her a sense of validation she had never received from the family she had tried to protect. The room was heavy with silence after Amara's words. Her mother looked away, unable to respond, the mask of control she had always worn cracking. Jimoke finished gathering her things, her movements calm and precise. She looked at her mother once, not with anger, but with quiet understanding. She didn't need an apology. She didn't need excuses. The truth had finally been stated, and that was enough. Amara stayed close to Jimoke, holding her hand, offering a comfort that the mother could never give. In that moment, Jimoke realized something powerful. The house, the shouting, the blame, it didn't define her. The family might have tried to push her down, but the truth was clear now. She had been wronged, but she had survived, and for the first time, someone else acknowledged it. That simple act of speaking the truth changed everything. And Jimoke felt lighter than she had in years. She was ready to step away, carrying herself with the dignity and strength that nobody in that house had ever given her. Her mother looked at Jimoke with wide eyes. expecting the usual obedience, expecting her daughter to fold, to take over the bills, to move back in, to fix everything she had broken by leaving. She imagined Jimoke rushing to make everything right, just like she always had. But Jimoke had changed. She stood tall, calm, and quiet, letting the words she had rehearsed flow naturally. "I'll help Amara," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't rebuild a house built on disrespect." The room went completely silent. Her mother's mouth opened, closed, and opened again, disbelief written across her face. She tried to argue, to demand, to shame Jimoke into doing what she wanted, but nothing worked. Jimoke didn't flinch. She made sure Amara had a safe place to stay, that her little sister's school fees were covered, that she could live without fear or want. But for the rest of the family, the mother who had yelled at her, the siblings who had watched and done nothing, Jimoke left it in their hands to face the consequences of their own choices. Her mother's voice broke, turning from pleading to threats, from threats to cries, but Jimoke didn't look back. Every step she took away from that house felt lighter than the first step she had ever taken that night she was thrown out. The anger, the pain, the years of being ignored and belittled, all of it stayed behind, confined within the walls of a home that had never truly valued her. Jimoke felt the cool air on her face as she stepped onto the street, and for the first time, she realized she was free. She didn't need to save a house, a family, or anyone who had never truly seen her worth. Her loyalty was to herself and to Amara, the one person who mattered. Her mother's sobs grew fainter with each step, and Jimoke's heart remained steady, full of a quiet strength she had earned through struggle and courage. She knew she had made the right choice. She wasn't abandoning her family. She was protecting herself and giving love where it was deserved. Nothing could pull her back. Nothing could make her doubt her decision. Jimoke walked away, each step a declaration. She was no longer invisible, no longer a servant to their expectations, no longer anyone's savior. She was her own person, and finally, her life was hers to live. Months later, Jimoke's life looked completely different. Her workshop buzzed with energy, filled with people repairing devices, testing gadgets, and learning from her. The tools she had once built quietly in her bedroom were now helping families across the city, solving real problems, and bringing smiles to those who used them. Amara lived with her, finally safe, happy, and free from fear or worry. She laughed more, studied harder, and shared small moments of joy with Jimoke that made all the struggles worth it. Jimoke never flaunted her success. She didn't need to. She didn't return home, didn't post about what she had accomplished, and didn't seek revenge. Every day, she simply worked, taught, and lived on her own terms. One evening, after a long day, Jimoke locked the workshop door, the sound echoing softly in the quiet street. Amara ran up to her and hugged her tightly, resting her head against Jimoke's shoulder. "You didn't lose a family," Amara whispered, her voice full of warmth. "You created one." Jimoke felt a surge of emotion, a calm happiness she had never known before. She realized that all the pain, the rejection, and the nights she had spent alone weren't the end. They were the doorway she needed to step into a life she had been too afraid to imagine. Her mother's harsh words, the betrayal, and the silence had pushed her out, but they had also given her the freedom to build something real, something that belonged to her and Amara, something full of love, respect, and understanding. Jimoke smiled quietly, holding Amara's hand, knowing this was everything she had ever wanted. She didn't need to be recognized by those who never saw her worth. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone who had taken her for granted. She had walked away when she needed to, and in doing so, she had grown into everything they said she'd never become. No one could take that away. She had a life she built herself, full of dignity, love, and purpose. And in that quiet evening, as the city lights reflected on her workshop windows, Jimoke understood something powerful. Leaving wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. She had finally stepped into a world where she belonged, where she was valued, and where she could thrive. No revenge. Nos choui place. Just a girl who had taken her pain, walked away, and became everything she was meant to be.